changing, we're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more, no more complaining people. Their lives are changing, we're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more, no more.
Today I want to talk with you about values. It has been coming up for me a lot lately. And not in a negative way, just one of those things that's in the forefront of my mind. It's something I'm journaling. It seems to be showing up in a lot of conversations. I'm on a dating app, and how often people will use the word values as code for something. Family values, traditional values, all of these meaning Christian values, which I have no issue with anyone's values as long as they enforce them upon themselves more rigorously than they do anyone else. Our values should be our values. We should actually take some time and sit down and say, in my life, this is the most important thing for me. And by that, I'm not talking about 10 Commandments stuff, although it can be in there. I'm talking about what you value. In other words, what it is you would put your time towards if you weren't working, what you would put your money towards if you weren't working, if you didn't have to work, what you would talk about endlessly, what is important to you. And I've noticed on these dating apps, a lot of times people put values, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as I was writing out, wanting to be very clear what I was looking for in someone who would be ideally my partner for the rest of my life, I wrote down that I wanted someone who knew their values and lived their values. There are a lot of people who live other people's values. They live the values of their church, but they don't necessarily agree with them because they've not necessarily thought them through. They live the values of their parents. They live the values of their social environment, where they came from. I know for myself that growing up where I grew up and how I grew up in the racist South, privileged with lots of lots of money and opportunities, that my values were one thing then, what I valued, what I put value on. That's how we have to think of our values. This is what I put value on. My values changed significantly when I got exposed to a very different part of the world. I often think of my life as that of similar to Siddhartha Gautama. I mean, we traveled first class and went around the world and did all this, and I had motorcycles and went to a private school and all of this. And I kind of thought everybody was that way. And then in college, I began to meet other people, and throughout the years, I exposed myself to literature from around the world, and it changed my values. You can change your values. Your values aren't stuck. The question is, what are your values? And once you put them down, and by the way, if you've got 30 values, you don't have any values. You need to be able to condense everything down into 3, 4, 5, 7 at the most. And the last 3 or 4 would be like, okay, maybe if everything else is first and foremost. So for myself, never one to be hesitant to self-disclose. For me, my value has shifted away from even making a world impact on the complaint-free world to maintaining internal equanimity, to maintaining internal calmness throughout the day in most life circumstances. And when life circumstances are super stressful, like the one I told you about yesterday, about the incident on the airplane, for that level to be less than it normally would. I've always thought of this, but now I'm really working towards it. And that is that A spiritual master is someone who has learned to master their spirit. That's the way I look at it. And I've really, really worked to master my own spirit over the last several years. But that's my number one value. You know, if I'm all of a sudden at 78 million people taking the complaint-free challenge, but I'm not calm and cool and etc. inside, what's the point? I've recently had a number of opportunities pop up for me, and in the past, because they were simultaneously, which is the way it goes. You know, that tends to be when it rains, it pours, and that's why you want to give gratitude when it rains. Because if you don't, if you go, oh, I got too many opportunities, as Pogo said, we are surrounded with overwhelming opportunities. I immediately thought, wow, okay, so this is arising for me, which is going to take some time, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to do this. And then there's also this other thing, and they both seem urgent. And I went, nothing's urgent unless I say it is. What's important for me is that I stay calm, cool, and collected, and that I also know that, like for yesterday, I had a speech I needed to record for a client. That was precedent. That's what took precedent. So maintaining that's my number one value. So when you have that value, you then begin to make easier decisions. Roy Disney, most people know Walt Disney, but when you say Roy Disney, people's just face goes blank. Roy Disney was Walt Disney's partner throughout his entire career. He was the money man. He was the one who figured out how to make it all happen. Walt dreamed it up. Roy figured out how to get investors and banks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And he said one of the greatest things. Roy Disney said, decision-making is easy when values are clear. Decision-making is easy when values are clear. Most people, as I said, don't really know what their values are. They're not attuned to their values. So we have to spend some real time asking ourselves. So now for me, since internal calm is my number one thing, I dated a woman a few times a month or two ago, and she was anything but calm. She was defined by the drama and the trauma that seemed to never, it was like an ongoing spigot of just drama. And I was like, nope, can't be in that situation. I even get now to where if I go into a place or a restaurant or something like that, and there's just too much going on, etc., and calmness is what I'm wanting in that moment, I'll go somewhere else. So that's my number one value. I also know my number two value. I also know my number three value, my number four, and my number five. I've written them down. How about you? Do you know what your values are? I talked the other day about people who call themselves vegans, but they've been transitioning for 35 years, this one woman told me. You're not transitioning. You're staying exactly the same, but you're wanting to play it both ways. You don't know what your value is. People think that people often question why I value veganism, and I have my reasons. And they're my reasons, and I really don't care what anyone else eats. And if it came out and said that, veganism was bad for you, it still would probably take a while for me to change. Because it's something I value for myself, for my own reasons. We need to know our reasons. There's that old saying of, a strong enough why will get you through any how. If you know why you want to do something, it'll get you through any how. So what are your values? Ask yourself, take some time to journal. There are some of you I know who are here every single day, and I so appreciate I wonder when you're not here, I really do. As I'm going through, I'm like, where is this person? Haven't seen them in a while. And I hope that by now you know the value in grabbing some sort of a journal. This is my Rocket Book, which I love because if I want to save it, it's got a QR code. I can automatically send it somewhere, and then you can write on it with these pens, and then you erase it so it doesn't even use trees. But spend some time writing down. This is my number one value. Is it? Why? Why? If you don't have a why, you're not going to live your values. The other day I was walking around, I think I shared with you here in the condo complex, and in the parking stall right next to mine, just outside of it, not in the stall, but out in the driveway, the road, I guess, was $100 bill. And my first thought was not, oh, I got $100. My first thought was, oh, these poor people who were here on vacation, that $100, that would have been a dinner at a decent restaurant here in Key Largo for several people. Oh my goodness. And I immediately went to trying to find the owner because that's my value. I see people here, this is such a microcosm of the macrocosm that is humanity, that talk about you need to obey the rules. Right. You need to obey the rules here, except for the one particular rule that this particular person has decided does not apply to them. And I see that everywhere. People who are the most vehement about other people breaking rules, whether it's putting towels on the chairs, as I told you, or putting chests outside their door to store gear and all that stuff. The more vociferous people are, the more likely they are to be a constant, regular rule breaker, I see. It's just an interesting phenomenon. Why? Because following the rules is a value they say everyone must do. And then you ask them why. And then they do it. But then you ask them, do you follow your values? Your values are worthless if you don't follow them. Your values are a great gift. It allows you to establish priorities and then project it out into a thinking universe to generate that which you desire. But you've got to know who you are at your core, or you're constantly going to attract static. One of the things I did on Sunday was like, man, I am constantly getting women who are interested in me on this dating app. And don't get me wrong, very grateful. And I start reading through their profiles and I'm like, we're not a match at all. We're not a match at all. And this app even will sometimes recommend people for you. And I'm like, I'm not a match with that person. I'm not a match with that person. So I decided to get rigorous. And I spent literally, you're going to think this is crazy, but I'm saying like a time on my hands, probably 4 hours sitting down writing everything about who I am. And then I wrote down who it is I want to attract, what type of person. And when I became super clear on that, all of a sudden, the people who were sending me likes and smiles and all this stuff dropped to the floor. It was like 2 or 3 people instead of 20, 30 times that. But they're actually people who seem like somebody I might have something in common with and be interested in. I know my values there. Do you know yours? Take some time, pull out something and write. And no, I don't believe that running it through your head is the same as writing it. I also don't believe that typing it is the same as writing it. There is some sort of a fluidity that taps into the creative right side of our brain that relaxes the left side and allows us to accomplish a lot more. So know your values, live your values, all right? And since I said live your values, this is your... I have noticed that since I'm doing this cute little thing several times that we are getting more clicks, more shares, we are getting more shares, we are getting more likes, and we're getting more comments. And I want to thank you for that because this is a living, breathing community that we're building together.
No more complaining people. Their lives are changing. We're flying high, creating a complaint-free world. No more